Hi, this is Sarah Meixel with CropSite.com, and today we're here with Aaron Heger. He is an Associate Professor of Weed Science at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. Aaron, talk a little bit with us, if you could, about global weed resistance and global weed management, what other countries are experiencing. You know,
Sure.
We know it's an issue in the United States, but who else is having a problem with it?
Actually, the problem associated with herbicide resistance are fairly common literally around the world. Now, some of the species might be different in certain countries, some of the resistant mechanisms might be different, but as we continue to see new populations evolve, not only in the US but around the world, very generally a lot of the reasons why these populations evolve are very, very similar. We rely on only a limited number of tools and technologies that allow these species to select for the resistant individuals. 3 weeks ago I was visiting with some farmers in Argentina, and they were very concerned about Palmer amaranth because it is now in many of the fields in some parts of Argentina. And they're very concerned about the evolution of resistance in Argentina to some of the herbicides that they would use there. So really the message there that we gave them was very similar to what we talked to our farmers in the state of Illinois. Really diversify, use different tools, use different techniques and tactics to try to manage these weed populations instead of just trying to use one or two things to simply control them.
Very good. And are the issues that we're seeing here in the U.S., are they the same types of weeds that they're seeing down there and in other parts of the world, or is it different issues depending on where you're at in the country, in different countries?
There certainly are some similarities in terms of species that we see in many countries. In others, for example, in Australia, they have some of the most challenging issues with resistance there in some of the grass species. We have some interesting challenges with some annual grass species in the state of Illinois. But really, we look to Australia because of some of the mechanisms of resistance that occur there. And it's very, very common to have metabolism-based resistance in some of the weed populations in Australia. And that's a very, very significant challenge. And unfortunately now, we see more and more metabolism-based resistance evolving in some of our populations here in the United States, and certainly in some parts of Europe as well. And these can be very, very significant challenges to try to manage these things simply with various herbicides. So the take-home message, regardless of where we are in the world, I believe, is really to diversify how we're trying to manage these weed populations and not just rely on one or two tools, herbicides, technologies, etc., because the weeds eventually will evolve to them.
Now, obviously, you know, people are very aware of glyphosate resistance, but that's not the only resistance that's out there, correct?
That's correct.
So, and is that a global issue as well? It's not just, you know, it's not just glyphosate that's the bad guy. There is resistance
Sure.
to the active ingredients across several boards, right?
Yeah, and I've actually lost track. I've not checked recently on the number of unique types of resistance around the world, but some of the most significant challenges that farmers in Illinois face, it's not just glyphosate resistance, but rather in some of our weed species, the evolution of resistance in individual plants to herbicides from multiple herbicide families.
Right.
And so we actually have populations of water hemp, Amaranthus tuberculatus now in Illinois, where individual plants may actually be resistant to herbicides from 4 different site of action families. So all that resistance in one plant. And what's also very disturbing to us is that even in the absence of use of those herbicides, once those traits become established in the populations, even years away from using those specific herbicides, those traits remain in the population and more or less become fixed. So it's not that we can simply quit using a particular herbicide for a while once we've evolved resistance to it, because once that resistance has evolved, it's going to be there for the long haul.
Very good. And just to kind of end on a positive note and not just about resistance, what are farmers doing, you know, globally? Is it I guess the same for everybody? It's the active ingredient rotation, crop rotation, those things?
It's really about diversifying more than what we've done recently. You know, we farm these very large things that vary in shape and size. We call them fields. But the reality of it is they're biological systems, and biological systems are never static, they're always dynamic. And so the more diversity that we can introduce in trying to manage these pest plants that we call weeds, the less likely that we're going to actually select for any one particular type of trait or resistance to just any one tactic. So really diversifying, it'll work in the United States, it'll literally work around the world in how we try to manage the various species and populations that we encounter.
Very good. Well, thank you so much, Aaron. I appreciate your time today. This is Sarah Mikesell with CropSite.com.